love that it says that.
It's a funny voice. Okay. Yeah. So I want to finish off what I sort of started. As every pastor says, this is a 3-part series. So this ended up being a 3-part series. And the last thing I want to show you is activity diagrams. And the reason I want to talk about activity diagrams is because it's the third tool in the tool belt for thinking through any problem, actually, software problems specifically. And it addresses the core question, and I don't remember who asked it, which was, hey, these sequence diagrams, these are cool. It shows the interaction between objects, basically classes. It shows the interaction between these things and dependencies and whatever, and that's cool. But what about the branching? Like, it's like, I got to make, what, 50 different sequence diagrams for all the possibilities? And the answer is no. You don't have to do that. And that's why we have an activity diagram. So I'm going to fire up an activity diagram. Today won't be terribly long. You know, I guess I used up too much material in the first CodeCraft and didn't have much left for the other ones. But anyway, got my Star UML thing here. We have a design engineering sync happening right after this meeting. I'm really curious to see what comes from that. Okay.
That's just a meeting between us and James.
I guess Anthony will be there. Mike's not going to be there because he's on vacation right now.
Yeah, he's moving.
Yeah.
Wow, that was a good joke. I'm glad you got that on the video. Okay. So what is an activity diagram? An activity diagram you think of as a flowchart. I'm sure you've all seen a flowchart. Maybe you've even used a flowchart, and you need to figure out, you know, what is going to be the sequence of these things, especially when they branches off into different directions. And so that's what UML has created the activity diagram to handle. So it's really not that complicated. I'll be done in 10 minutes. But like I said, it's the last missing tool of the tool belt. And then that's right. And then you'll have your power gauntlet, and then you can destroy half of life.
Yay, programming.
Yeah, I always knew it. Path to success. Okay, so I'm going to go here. I go under logical view and add my diagram. Is it showing that? Is it showing like my drop down list?
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, I can see that.
Look at it. It goes over to the side.
Funny.
Yeah, that's really funny. Okay, that is done. Okay, I'm going to go to activity diagram. Okay, so here we are in activity diagram. I guess I'll go through kind of the nomenclature first of what are all these parts. So let's call my thing example. Okay, all these things we didn't really talk about use cases. Maybe I could or should talk about use cases as well, because all these things are interrelated. So you have a write-up of a use case. I guess I can do that right after this. You'll have a write-up in a use case, and you have some initial state that you talk about in your use case. So let's use an example of a typical game, and you're already logged in, right? Like you're logged into the account or whatever. So you can't do the matchmaking. Josh and I were just watching a GDC talk on matchmaking and using machine learning in order to improve matchmaking. And I thought it might be like not very interesting, but actually so far it's pretty interesting. Anyway, so when you're starting your matchmaking, there's an assumption that you're already logged in, you have a valid account, your bills have been paid and whatever. Like, so we're not going to deal with all that. We don't need all that. And so when you're writing a use case, you will say the prerequisites. So the initial state that we are now going to talk about, this is, preamble. This is like dealt with somewhere else. And so that's the first thing we drop down. So the plain circle is the initial state, and you can name it, but it doesn't show anything. It doesn't show anything on the diagram, but that's the thing to learn about UML, is like the plain circle is the start state. Okay, so the final state is the plain circle with a circle around it. I don't know, it's trying to be a stop sign. I don't know what it's trying to be. I think a stop sign makes a lot of sense, but anyway. So that's the final state. So those things are separated by stuff in between. And so the stuff in between is we have actions. And yeah, I can just keep clicking these. When you like hold down on these things, you can go into like a multi-click mode. Click, 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 click. I think until you hit escape, or no, you go back to select. And just get rid of these two. So these are the activities that you want to do. I'm not even going to bother coming up with an example right now as I go through them. So then you have transitions. And so I go from the start date to activity, start state to activity number 1. And then I go to activity number 2. But then we'll have some kind of conditional here. It's really important to get these lines lined up perfectly. Okay, they got to be straight.
That was kind of annoying when I was working on some of the other charts.
I know.
Man.
There are, in other tools, I think there's ways of like going on a grid or something. I don't know if there's a grid on here, but
code won't compile right if you don't align the arrows correctly.
That's right. So you get to some decision point, and so we plop in our decision point, and you can name your decision point, right? It's currently called decision 1. So it's just, I don't know, how many tacos. So that's fine for over here in your navigation, whatever, but it doesn't show anything on the screen. And I think that's a bit of a failing, but whatever. So we have our transition. Yeah, so the transition to here. And then I'm going to put number 3 here, number 4 here. And it's just a flow chart. It's not that advanced. So we can show the standard flow. Right, and then this ends our use case. It's here on the transitions that you put what is actually happening. So I'll call this one no tacos. And then I could put this one. You could just hit enter on it. And so that's how you see your state. So you can't see the question. You can only see the direction that the flow of the thing is going to go. I kind of think that's a failing. You may not agree. That's fine. Okay, so, and that's how you get your final state. So this helps you think things through, because you can now look at the sequence of things. That's what the sequence diagrams are for. And you go, wait a minute, I can actually do that earlier, or I need to check that, or I have a dependency where, you know, maybe activity 2 needed tacos. So it's like, oh, that's actually, we need to move up this decision thing up to here. And then you got to go and reroute all of your little, you got to reroute these things. But anyway, that's when you would move around your sequence in here. And okay, cool. So now I know what's going on. So again, it's a flow chart. It's not that exciting. There's one last thing which is kind of different and special for software. That's the self-transition. So this thing needs to do something upon itself. And so you can call that yeah. I wouldn't, sometimes people write in loops here. I'm not sure that I even recommend that, but I don't know. This can be an async thing. Wait for the server to provide you some tacos. So that's where you can define what's happening there. And
recursiveness.
Sure. You get into situations where you need to be self-referencing. And then the last thing is synchronization. So synchronization is when you want things to go in parallel. And so a really simple example would be you want to fire off animation, you want to fire off sound. So what we do is we say, okay, activity 4 is moving to this synchronization point for parallelization. And then we have our activity this could be play animation sound. And I don't know, just use another one, update the analytics. So this would be an example of like coroutine usage, multi-threading and such, because these are not dependent on each other. And so you transition from the synchronization point. And so you show all these things working, and then usually what I do is I break out all the pieces and then I go through and put in all the lines later because it's a lot easier software wise. And then you can show when certain things are syncing up. Actually, what I did here is sort of illegal. You're not supposed to do that. So what we'll do is provide another synchronization point here, and so then this is what you're supposed to do.
Okay.
To show how it works. And so, oops. And so these things are telling you like something special is going on. So when you go to code the thing, like I'm in a special zone for how things are firing off. And so obviously you can have synchronization points within synchronization points, and you can see the flow of how these things go. So the sequence diagrams aren't able to do this. So this is another view on the same sort of data to be able to give you that. There is no way to generate code from this. It's not used that way. Questions, comments?
I'm just making one while you're talking about it to try to help me learn it.
Okay.
Activities are like methods or functions, or not like classes. Okay.
Correct. They're usually methods, and they really are use cases. And so I can come up with a quick use case in order to describe that. I don't think the swim lanes thing is not really important. It is possible to have activities inside of activities. This is, I think what you do is this. Maybe you need to do this kind of thing, maybe not, but it is possible to put activities inside of activities.
And this isn't actually like a state diagram. So even though it says action state and substate and initial state, we're not actually making a state diagram here, right?
Yeah, you could definitely use this for state diagrams.
Sure.
And they do.
Okay. But an activity diagram and a state diagram are different. Like they don't seem quite the same.
Well, you will recognize this looks a heck of a lot like the Unity animation system, right?
Sure.
Put these things in different places and start drawing lines between them, and they're like, hey, it looks just like Unity, right? So yeah, it is for making state diagrams. And a state diagram is an activity diagram with the purpose of the activity of state. If that makes sense.
The only difference is in a state diagram, the activities are generally not methods. I hope.
Yes.
They're generally more classes or some other thing. But
yeah, I'm trying to use the proper terms. So this notation, this thing is called an activity diagram, and you can use it for state, and you can use it for method activities, and you can use it for planning out whether you should marry your wife or not. There's like, you can use it for whatever you want.
Marry your wife?
Yeah, your future.
do you have one of those like just in your backlog where you're like, here's a good example?
Yeah. You would create a state diagram as an activity diagram. There is nothing else in UML that is a state diagram that you could draw a state diagram in. This is it.
Fair enough.
Okay, so I'll go back to having a little example from a use case, because you may not know the use case kind of process or nomenclature, because I can't rely on the schools for anything. Oh, I said that out loud. Okay. Okay, so this is going to be really basic because all that's important to me is just covering the basics. So I'm going to share my Word. Oh, there's a whiteboard built into Zoom. That's kind of cool. We should use that. Okay, so here is our use case, and I will call it NPC daily routine. So we have preconditions. I'll call them prerequisites. And then I can't really think of anything. I don't know. He was born. Okay. And then we have our flow. And the flow is written as usually kind of a dialogue. It's between the users. This NPC daily routine actually has no user interaction, so it's a bit of a terrible example of that, but that's okay. I'll just continue as is. Okay, so the first thing is he's, or actually prerequisite is sleeping for the night. Okay, so that's our initial state, is he's sleeping for the night. So the first thing is he's going to wake up 1 hour before work start time. And then he's going to check his needs, which is hunger. I'm trying to think other ones in Archmage. I mean, they have procreation and like there's like, I don't know, 12 different needs or something. So then this is where you run into a weird thing in the flow where like you have to start typing ifs. I don't have auto numbering turned on because it drives me crazy. Okay, so that's where somebody would write if low then fill, and then it's travel to work, which in the case of Archmage is a teleportation system because we don't actually care to see these people on maps. Usually, if they work outside, then we do care about seeing them on a map. But when they're internally to a town, we'll say this guy's the miller. So he travels to his work. He works, travel home, check needs, go to sleep. Okay, so that's use case. And then we have post conditions, or kind of like your final state. And this is now sleeping. So this is really basic, rough write-up of a use case. And in this case, so actually it would be routine, actor is okay, so this is how use cases are written. So if we take this document and we go to do a activity diagram, it maps out pretty well. I can actually line up things. I don't know how to share two windows. It's usually.
Can you share your whole monitor?
Yeah, I can share my whole monitor. It's gonna see all your heads. That's right. That's really all you want to see.
Exactly.
Yeah, so I'll just share the whole screen for now. Okay, so I want to create a new activity diagram. Okay, and so I have my initial state, which is matching whatever's here. And then I have my action, which is to wake up. But something that it wasn't considered. What if the guy's unemployed? So unemployment's a big problem in Archmage. So this would be if they have a job. But actually, everybody has to wake up at some point. We have a wake up time. So I'll just ignore that difference. So we wake up, and then we check the needs. So this is the decision point, and then we have the possibility of fulfill a need, which you can see is become like a method call, right? Because the fulfillment of the need, there's a lot of things that could happen entertainment wise, food wise, or whatever. There's like a lot of stuff that goes into it. But from a high level, all we care about is fulfilling the need. And then travel to work, and what's not covered in there, which should be, is so how do we do a chance for encounter? So that would be another decision point, and that would be and that check for encounter could be monsters, it could be the player, and then they work, then they travel home, and then they check their needs, and then they go to sleep, and then we end. So work. And so you can see that, wait a minute, this is the entertainment check again, right? Where we check our needs. I don't think you can have the same name thing. It's usually check. Yeah, it's not supposed to allow you to have things all the same. Oh, it did. Okay. So I know, it's so not aligned. So this point could be an event, sorry, in here. This could be a chance for an encounter as well. On these transitions. So that's starting to tell you something about how your methods can be written, what your reuse is going to be. So now I gotta move all these things around. Oops. So I see here the check for encounter and check for encounter. Okay, so that's getting used twice, and I see where it's being used. And then if there was to be an encounter, like, so there's some kind of battle that happens. And there's multiple end states. I didn't mention that. So you can only ever have one initial state, obviously, but you can have multiple end states. And so this final state would be dead. So we have to check to see if they won the battle. Okay, so they're traveling home. We're checking to see if they have an encounter. And then we check to see if they survive the encounter. And that's kind of the gist of it. So I find this incredibly helpful for thinking through a use case. The text part of the use case gets you pretty far about what the person wants, what the designer's looking for. But when you go through and start diagramming it out, then it starts to you start to see reuse, you start to see that's not going to work. You have to do this first, and those things. So that is, any questions or anything on this? Well, I managed to fill a whole half hour, so I'm pretty proud of that. What you will be getting working on Archmage is kind of a use case write-up, kind of like that. I've been writing use cases for decades, and I don't follow the formal thing. I don't follow a formalized process of anything, right? I'm not big on formality, right? There's a big difference between Gantz and I, right? But I do believe in it. I believe in the essence of it, and so I'm not going to write out a prerequisites or post conditions unless there is one, right? So if you just get like a straight block of the flow, that's because that's all I thought that was necessary. Where I have followed the template and like every single page looks exactly the same and you have all these blank areas on it to show that there is no prerequisites or post conditions or something like that. But anyway, I don't care about that at all. So you'll be getting some kind of flow, and you won't be getting a diagram with it unless we drastically change the workflow around here where I have to go and diagram everything. Maybe we should, I don't know, but you'll be getting a flow. And so an activity diagram might be a good helpful way for you to think through the flow, because it's really easy to read the flow and say, oh yeah, that makes sense. Start coding, right? And so these steps in between obviously help. Okay, I won't talk anymore unless anybody has any other questions.
Did Tyler and I do it right?
I don't know. I'm staring at the Zoom screen. What are you guys talking about? Best practices? What?
We made some graphs, Tyler and I.
Okay, that looks amazing.
Thank you.
Okay, nothing else?
I
Okay,
think so.
next
That's
week.
how I got it.
Okay, that's right. Okay, so next week we will address Tyler's question, which was, do you remember, Tyler, what your question was?
Yeah. How do you determine what is rigid or robust code versus fragile or fragile code?
Yeah, so that's what we'll talk about next week with Sean here.
Cool.
Not physically here, he'll be far, but here.